So many people will probably say, or have probably already said, that 2023 was a great year in video games. I think a smaller portion of people will correctly say, in totality, though, for the games industry, 2023, a bad year, honestly, for video games in general, as a hobby. Uh, the AAA video game space getting more and more unsustainable, costs inflating at an exponential level, becoming more and more unsustainable, both as in the job space there and what it takes to make the AAA game. Also, big companies buying up smaller and smaller studios and stuff, taking big gambles, and then having to then lay off a bunch of people and companies when those gambles inevitably don't pan out. And also the ever increasing encroachment of dumb ideas. Just when you thought, oh shit, we've passed the NFT craze of people trying to shoehorn those into games, although that's not 100% squashed, unfortunately. The new threat, and that sounds dramatic, but I don't mean it to be, AI shit that is encroaching upon a lot of stuff in our lives, but to keep it in the realm of video games, something that's just more and more being used and be looked into how viable it is by big companies to try to reduce costs and cut out actual jobs and people from the equation. My theory is that if you give any kind of business the ability to try to reduce costs in any shape or form, my money, if I had to place it somewhere, is going to be that they're going to continue to do that and push that and keep trying to push AI stuff, art, music, voices, anything they can to reduce any amount of costs, and choose that. They'll choose that over the attempt to what am I looking for? Choose that over making any decisions that actually betters the individual people that make, create, and play games. So I don't know. I don't know how it's very, for me personally, I don't know how you don't look at that and just be like massively depressed about the space as a whole when you take all those things together and add up and just realize just how kind of honestly fucked up the industry is going to become over the next couple years, if it's not already past the point of saving. So yeah, it's kind of hard when people are here for even honestly the past like 12 months, but like, this is a great game, a great year in video games. I mean, just being like releasing the longest sigh ever possible. I guess if I wanted to go that direction, I would say it's amazing that we've had a year of really dope releases in spite of all that happening. Especially, you know, hopefully on the indie side of game making. But yeah, I don't mean to be such a downer about it all, but damn, I don't know how I don't open this video without just being like, man, this past year was rough and it's only gonna get rougher in 2024. So yeah, that's rough. But putting that aside, just barely, this is my annual video where I recap my favorite games that I played of the past year. A video I've now been releasing around mid-January because I don't have time to do this before holidays and everything. But also, God, normalize these videos. Award shows, other people making videos like this, normalize. End of year recap list, top whatever's into a little bit into 2024. In my opinion, be the change you want to be, or be the change you want to see. That's what I say. That's why this video is coming out. Fingers crossed, mid-January. Let's, every year I try to change the pace of the video, try to change up how it kind of presents itself, so as to try to make adjustments. Like last year's video, I can see was almost 2 hours. It was an hour 45, hour 44. If I can help it, this isn't going to be that long. I guess you watching this video can see the time bar. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to try to keep it a bit snappier. So let's go over the house rules real quick. Again, I did this last year. I think I'm going to keep it. No honorable mentions. Obviously, if you really want to see all the games that I played, I have the account on the GG site. Shows all the games I beat of the past year. You can go see. I give a little star ranking. That doesn't mean a ton, but at least gives a general view. Obviously, most of the games I played the past year, I did play on stream. So obviously, if you really want to know certain things, opinions during my playthrough, those are there if you really, really, absolutely care. Unless you don't have time for that. Most people don't. Speaking of games the past year, I'm looking at it from my count. Again, using the GG app that I use, the GG site that I use, I feel like I've noted down 28 games, which is quite a handful less than last year. I've talked about it before, but that's honestly just because I've spent almost 200 hours or so with one visual novel this past year, which was great. It was a lot of fun. Maybe it'll show up on this list, but what it did was make it so that I couldn't play a bigger breadth of games, which on one hand is kind of like, oh, it's a bummer. On the other hand, I'm like, it's fine. It's both. It's both a bummer and a fine. It's both a bummer and fine. It can be both at the same time. But I did find, overlooking at the list, that last year I did play a bunch more smaller, but like a wider variety of games. I'm hoping in 2024 I can strike a good balance between possibly undertaking another long ass thing and also sneaking in some time for a bunch of smaller projects and stuff, but we'll see how that goes. So yes, 28 games by my count. And then what I do is I have that whole list, and then off to the side I always keep a list of games that I'm like, all right, these could be in, this could, as I'm beating them, as the credits roll, I put them on a separate list, and I say, this could be, in theory, could somehow squeeze into the top 10. And if I'm looking at that list here, it was about 20, so I didn't do a great job. From 28 to 20. But I think I did just I also played a lot more higher quality things, in my opinion, this year. I toned down, especially because I was playing a ton of that one visual novel game. I didn't have time to I had even less time this year to check out shit games. So, or games that I just was not 100% interested in possibly checking out, or if they were, on the mid side. Then at that point, I take the 20 or so games, and then I go into my mind palace. I actually did this a couple weeks ago. I enter my mind palace for several hours. I meditate. I look at the games. I start crossing off things slowly. The slowest process ever. One of these days I want to film this process, because it sounds like I'm joking, but it's I assume a meditating position. It's the slowest thing. I hem and haw. I talk aloud to myself in my apartment by myself. I consider many different things. I take it very seriously for a very unserious thing. Start crossing things off, and once I get down to like 12, then it's like really serious, because then it's like, I'm gonna have to cut off 2. Honestly, the 2 that get cut off at that point, like I said, I'm not gonna do honorable mentions, but man, it's so sad. It's a sad day when those last 2 get like crossed off. And then I have the 10, and then it's like a whole nother process where I spent about a week As I'm like working and stuff, I'm like, do I want to put this at 10, 9? I flip and you flip flop things constantly. It's a very, like I said, very serious process. I'm a very serious person about this. I'm so goofy about it. And then finally you have the top 10. And it's funny because one of these I flipped literally just before recording this. And the reason I do it into January is because I let things settle. And then I'm like, right up to recording, I could be like, I want to flip these things, whatever the case is. But yeah, other house rules, keep it going. This isn't just games that came out in 2023. I'm always constantly trying to beat down the backlog of games. So this is games that I played over the past year, this year, 2023. Most of the games are probably not games that came out this year. You know, that's just the very nature of it. Let's quickly talk about 3 games that I didn't play that probably a lot of people that did play them are going to put them high on lists such as this. So just to get them out of the way, if you're like, how is this game not on this list? If you just happen to stumble upon this and you don't know exactly what I'm playing or what games I tend to play or whatever the case may be, games I may get into the future, but didn't get to in 2023. On the top of my head, those 3 games, Tears of the Kingdom, Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, I did not touch those this year. I just did not. I didn't have the time. I didn't play Breath of the Wild, so I probably wouldn't have played Tears of the Kingdom. I didn't play Alan Wake the first. Probably didn't care to play Alan Wake 2, despite me being interested in some of the things that it did do. The Baldur's Gate 3, I would actually love to get to at some point, but I just didn't. I just didn't this year. I didn't have the time. So those 3 games won't be on this list, despite those mostly probably being high up on other people's lists. And yeah, I think that's all them. The last housekeeping bit, I've said in this past, who knows if it's going to be the true here. I feel like at the number 1 spot generally tends to go to games that did come out in the past year, although it's not a hard and fast rule. I don't know how to explain it, but like, I think in my head, I'm like, oh, it feels like the top spot should, not necessarily it has to, but it feels like it should. Maybe I give them an extra little bump to get into the number 1 spot. So we'll see if that happens this year. And then finally, I like to recap, since I've been doing these types of videos, recap what the video or games that I've done got the number 1 spot in the past years. This is actually my 5th year doing this. I think I've been streaming maybe 5 years as well. I don't know what time is, but I do check back and see what games got number 1 spots the past year. So I started in 2019. That was Death Stranding, a pick that I feel every year it ages like a fine wine. Every year we remove from that, feels better and better. Death Stranding, number 1 in 2019. More and more people are coming on the Death Stranding train with me as the years go on. I feel so good about that pick. I feel so good about it. 2020 was Final Fantasy VII Remake. What a fucking game that was. Can't convince me otherwise. Very excited to be playing Rebirth here in about 2 months' time. Early contender for already game of 2024 for me. Probably. That's going to be a good one. 2021, Inscription. Inscription was really good. I was watching my last thing. I wish I could wipe my brain, replay that for the first time ever. Inscription, highly recommend that. 2022, I kind of forgot I had picked this, but I also stand by this because I was really passionate about it when it came out, and I loved everything about it. It's a vibe. 2022, Neon White. And that brings us here to 2023. So, without any further delay, I'm going to try to keep these snappy. I think I was looking at my list. I don't think I'm going to try to do any spoilery things about anything. I'm going to try to give nice, concise speaking about the games, my opinions slightly, and then go from there, if that makes sense. I can already tell this is going to be a rambly video. I see the recording right now, depending on what I cut out editing-wise, it's already almost 15 minutes or so. And I've yapped a whole lot for not saying much. So, we gotta get right. We gotta get right into this. Let's see. Number 10. Just barely squeaking into number 10 here. This, honestly, could have switched with the game that will not be mentioned for number 11. But number 10 for me is Final Fantasy 16. I am not interested in... I remember when this came out and leading up to launch of Final Fantasy 16, the whole online discourse was like, it's not a true Final Fantasy game. And like, that's not a conversation I wanted to ever dip my toes in or be a part of, because that's just dumb rhetoric. Final Fantasy 16 definitely leaned on the action side of things. I remember they were talking it up as like, oh, it's like DMC, you know, combat fighting. I've never played DMC games, but I know of them. Pretty RPG light, if we start my criticisms. I get what it was going for, and honestly, I'm not like, oh, it should have changed or been more of an RPG type of thing. But like the RPG elements of it did feel kind of consequential, and that's things like certain equips for different weapons and everything. Like that was all basically neutered as like a system. Choosing what to sink some XP into some abilities and stuff is fine, but once you got a loadout, at least for me, once I got a loadout, because you could only have so many spaces for loadouts, you couldn't have everything equipped at the same time. Like, once you had a loadout you really liked and kind of were comfortable with, it kind of just was like, well, I don't need to be switching around and investing too much into thinking about this. But, amazing game as far as fun story, characters, some really great characters, some really great, and I mean truly really great set pieces, both boss fights and some emotional set pieces, story bits and everything. Some characters, I'm not getting spoiler territory. Some characters kind of got the shaft, I feel. You can count me amongst that group that feels like maybe some side characters kind of were done dirty, but it's fine. Ending was fine. I've yet to play the DLC that has come out, but I'm excited to dip into those sometime here soon. Combat was fun and flashy. Like I said, some of the boss fight and set pieces, you could tell that they were really like put a ton of effort into those and were really banking on those being super fun and amazing, and they were. Some actually truly bonkers moments. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there was like one boss fight where a thing happened and I literally popped so hard. I was like, I can't believe this is what they're doing. So shit like that is fun. Don't take itself too seriously. Obviously, it's a very serious setting, but I mean, moments like that where you want to have a ton of fun with certain moments. I love a game not taking itself too seriously in moments like that. The music was amazing. Voice acting, the acting in the game in general was actually really great. So many different characters that were actually really well done. Again, not too interested in the whole, is it truly a Final Fantasy game, the way it kind of ended up being. That kind of discussion I think is just dumb, and that's, you know, Final Fantasy for a long period of time now has kind of changed what the series actually is. And honestly, I'd rather a series such as Final Fantasy that's been around for so long kind of change up and be different things each time. I kind of like that kind of aspect of it as being a longtime Final Fantasy fan. Honestly, the negatives, like I said, RPG systems kind of light for my liking. And honestly, the biggest bummer probably was the whole side quest system in the game, because the way my brain works, I'm like, well, if the game is offering it as a side quest, I must do it. And then once I played it for a bit, then you're told like, oh, if you want to get to like the end and really do like really see the side quests kind of pay off, that you have to do some of these earlier side quests because they're like parts of chains. So you can't just be like, oh, this side quest does not interest me because I don't feel like teleporting to some section and collecting 6 flowers and killing 2 frogs or something. Like, there's a chance that if you don't do that, then later on down the line, you're not going to see some emotional payoff to some side quest or something. So that was kind of like, as far as I understand, that was the system, or that's at least how it was like told to me. And I was like, well, now I got to do all of them. And so really the side quest system was kind of bloated, and in a bad way. It wasn't even bloated in a good way, if that's a great visual and representation of what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I kind of wish the side quest system was overhauled, to say the least. But other than that, it was fun. It was a fun time. I have a feeling, unfortunately, the DLC, the second DLC, is probably going to give a much, I feel like it's set up to give a much more meaningful payoff ending kind of thing, and that kind of stuff bugs me. I wish games didn't necessarily do that, if that makes sense. I'm trying not to spoil things again, but like, yeah, we'll see how the DLC treats the end of the game there. And yeah, like I said, it just squeaks into the top 10. I was so hyped for Final Fantasy 16. I still liked my experience with it, and I played it to death. I did everything I could in the game other than doing a New Game Plus, because, my hard and fast rule pretty much is not to do New Game Pluses and hope that games don't ask me to do New Game Pluses. So I did everything other than a New Game Plus, basically, with that game, and saw everything it had to offer, and thought it was just decent. I was, like I said, leading up to the game, very hyped for it. And it only let me down just slightly. So, Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy 16. 10th spot. Number 9. A game I beat, I think probably the first game I rolled credits on for this year. And I have to constantly remind myself that it was in 2023 that I did it. Number 9 is Paradise Killer. I had no idea what to actually expect when I got into Paradise Killer, other than people being like, oh, it's like a mystery thing, oh, it's a visual no. Like, the way it was pitched to me, and then what it ended up being, were very different, where my brain, I keep talking about it, I said it during the playthrough, and then I'll say it, a million more times, but I thought I went in expecting multiple chapters, different mysteries, things like that. That is not the case at all. You have one synth-wavy, open-world, big-ass island, a bunch of characters, and then you have one big mystery that branches into a bunch of little mysteries, but you're all solving them at one time. It's not like multiple chapters. It was such like a whiplash moment at the moment, because like I was expecting like, oh, it's gonna be just like a Danganronpa or a Phoenix Wright or something. I was expecting multiple chapters, different mysteries to solve, but it really is. It's like one or 2 or 3 like big mysteries that you're trying to solve that branch and go off into smaller mysteries that you can also try to solve. But it is an open worldy, just speaking to a bunch of these really interesting characters to solve this mystery. And again, not to get into spoilery territory, but like the way it handled the mystery and how you could solve it was interesting. Also, again, I'm very much used to games like Danganronpa or Phoenix Wright, where it's like, hey, if you get the mystery wrong or you accuse someone of something and you're wrong, that's a failed state. And this didn't necessarily have that. So much so that to this day, I regret one of the conclusions I drew at the end of my playthrough. And I was devastated then, in the moment when I was playing it, devastated now. Can never take it back. So yeah, it's a very, I always said when I was playing it, and now if I was to describe it, it's like a mystery game, like one of those, but more vibes based. You spend a lot more time going around this island with very striking visuals and a soundtrack that just fucking rocks, honestly, and fits the game so well. It's a very, I hate the term, but a very vibes based game. Yeah, you go around, you basically try to catch people in lies, you collect pieces of evidence around the island, you're like, hey, you said you were doing this with this character, but there's literally, this sounds so basic. The way I'm explaining it makes it sound so basic. But there's like, oh, there was tire tracks on this area. So, of course, you're the person with the car. So it only makes sense that this was you at this time. So why are you lying? And then the character will be like, yeah, I was lying because of this whole thing. So you're like, what the fuck? I don't want to have to accuse you of things. And they're like, I know. I know. You're like, I really like you as a character. And you're like, I know I've let you down. I'm sorry, Austin. But it is a super fun. Like I said, it was fun. At first I was like, oh, it's a drag to kind of like walk around the island. But you're constantly finding new things, not only collecting things. There's like a shit ton of like collectibles that were just kind of adding to the, again, this word, vibes. But the music actually made that time that you're kind of just exploring and seeing the different things. Seeing these different things and these different characters kind of chilling out around the place. You're like, oh, this is actually not that bad. If you're not like me and you don't constantly get lost and have a directionally challenged such as I, you probably have a better time navigating the island. I swear I probably spent too much time being lost, but I'm gonna put that more on me just because I'm bad at navigating things, any space, whether it be in a video game or the real world. But yeah, by the time the game ended and Paradise Killer was finished, I really enjoyed my time. Like I said, I finished it really early this year. Oh, speaking of soundtrack, is it gonna be this? Look at this. Nope. Look at that. Paradise Killer soundtrack. Look at that. That's an aside, I guess. We'll see if we cut that out of the video when I edit this. Yeah, it's Paradise Killer. Super fun game. Highly recommend. If you like solving mysteries and stuff, Paradise Killer is a fun time. And the soundtrack is great. Can't say that enough. That's all. That's all I have for that. Okay, number 8. Maybe the first game on this list that some people are going to take offense of how low I'm possibly rating it for this year. Number 8. I finally got to this year playing Disco Elysium. And this is going to be Disco Elysium, the final cut. I loved a lot of the things Disco Elysium did. I love its old school CRPG style. I loved its a lot of its dialogue. I loved a lot of its writing. I loved a lot of what it was doing and attempting to do, and the space it occupied. I'll get it out of the way so I don't forget it and don't do it just at the end as like a final bummer note. There were, and I know this shouldn't affect me too much, and it's totally not. It's not like I'm only putting it this low on 8 just because of this, but there were a couple quests that are still like fresh in my head that like got bugged out for me and actually became like a big bummer, because the whole thing about Disco Elysium is like, again, I only played through Disco Elysium once. I know I could have replayed it and done things completely different, but again, I don't have the time or the effort or the care to play games multiple ways, unfortunately. But there were a couple times where like quest lines like bugged out on me that I just could not rescue or save or, fix, which the way Disco Elysium is set up, where your decisions early and the things you do are supposed to have like these long tails of like how it affects certain events happening and everything. The fact that early on some things got bugged or things at the very end got bugged, so I've been following certain quest lines or certain people or certain characters a certain way, and then the thing at the very end just isn't working like it is, and then you're looking it up, and I'm like, there were times during my playthrough, even on stream, where I was like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, this is supposed to be this, and then you look it up and people are saying this is supposed to happen this, and then some people are like, finally you find some like old ass Reddit thread that's like, yeah, this is bugged for me and it doesn't make sense, and I'm like, this is a fucking bummer. Again, I don't want to try to spoil a ton of things, but if I'm trying to remember, the one that bummed me out the most was the character that, again, I'm going to be as vague as possible, partly because I don't want to spoil things and also partly because my memory sucks, but you, at some point, like a few days in, I think it's possible that you run into someone that you could be talking to or negotiate with, and because of that, you could potentially get a gun back, and that character at that quest just wasn't there for me, and I couldn't get them to spawn despite me doing a bunch of different things. I even booted up earlier saves to try to like get it working again, and it just couldn't. And the problem with that is not only did I not get to see the end of that, I watched a video of it, but not only did I not get to see that in my game, but the fact that I then didn't have my gun for a later section of the game was a massive bummer, and that had things. And so, like, again, like I'm trying to say, like, if you go through Disco Elysium and the whole thing is like, oh, certain actions you take really impact things later on and in the moment, and once a thing gets bugged that bad, where you're like, damn, like it's impacting all these things, like this doesn't feel like my decisions mattered at this point. That's kind of a bummer. It was a big bummer. And I don't want to say like it's at number 8 here just because of those, but it is like, I'm like getting mad about it. It is a big bummer that like you play through this whole game and you're like, oh, I'm choosing things very purposefully, and I'm taking in a lot of things and want this to happen, and now all of a sudden, because of something out of my control, like it just doesn't, it's like a whole section doesn't pan out how you expected it to or wanted to, or how it should be happening because of some weird things. Now, let's get to the positives. Some great characters. King Kitsuragi, big fan. I know I'm not alone in that. That's a fun character. Great writing. Main pro tag. Great blank slate that they allow you to really do some really fun things with, as far as painting them how you want them to be painted. Is that a phrase? Paint them the way you want them to be painted. But great character as well. Other great characters. I mean, honestly, a whole long list of great characters. I would be sitting here too long just trying to recount everyone. But yeah, I think I liked its systems. I liked how it worked. I had, again, I'm not this is not at number 8 because of this, but I feel like I had so many unlucky rolls. I can recount so many times where I'm like, this is bound to work. I think missing rolls that you totally should feel like that you get is part of the charm. So things like that, though, is very funny how bad my luck was at certain key points. But honestly, the ending was super cool. For me, at least how I experienced the ending. Again, despite some of the bad bugged moments that I ended up having, some of the wonky things. Speaking of bugs, there was like several weird, annoying, not like quest breaking like I was talking about earlier, but an annoying little things that like popped up, which is less severe, but also just like annoying. Also, couldn't for the life of me. I was playing the Final Cut version, which, as far as I understand, introduced the quick travel system. For the life of me, doesn't make any sense. I tried so many different things. Why? Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It was just like, 50-50 about like whether the game was going to allow you to do it or not. I don't even know how I was supposed to figure out what the hell is happening with all that. But aside from that, I do really like it. I do like the system. I do like, part of reason why people are like, you probably should play Baldur's Gate 3 is because I do like the whole CRPG system as a video game thing. I like that old school style. I love random number generation. That sounds really nerdy, right? I love random number generation and dice rolls, but I do. I thought it was super cool, super fun. Just like Paradise Killer, there was a part of me that's like shitty at navigating. Like I was like, oh, where was that one character where they had the little shop? And I was like, I gotta fucking walk around and find it. I'm bad. So probably would be less burdensome if I just wasn't so sucky at navigating spaces. But yeah, I feel like some people might take offense to Disco Elysium being ranked so low, because I know when it came out, everyone loved Disco Elysium, and me getting, I do partly think me getting to Disco Elysium a few years later, after it's been nothing but hyped, when people do talk about it now, it did suffer. It does, unfortunately, I think, suffer just a bit in that kind of discussion in my head where it's like, I don't want to say overhyped, but you hear almost nothing but glowing praise, and then you finally get to it and you're like, oh, like this is good, but like as much as people talk about it. Also, this is gonna make me sound dumb, but I'm gonna say it. Maybe I'll cut this when I edit it, who knows. Disco Elysium number 8. Don't hate me. Number 7, Paranormasight. Paranormasight, I caught wind of just because of things that I look into throughout the year, but Square Enix pulled another Square Enix and didn't, market their games at all like they should. Paranormasight, sneaky hit gem of the year. I'm calling it. Almost no one probably knows about it because of how poor it was talked about or put out there, really. But it is a visual novel that does a lot of interesting things. And if you are like me, the main selling point when you think about Paranormasight, if you're like, should I play Paranormasight, is a visual novel that occupies that visual novel space where you're like doing interesting things and there's interesting puzzles to do, and maybe, you know, non-spoilery, but some meta like puzzle things that when you solve the answer, you're like, oh shit, that was really clever. It does all those things that you do in some visual novel stuff, but it's a much shorter experience. Like you get in and get out. I think even my slow ass didn't spend any more than like 15 or so hours, I think. I'd have to recheck the time. Don't check me on that. Actually, do check me. You can see my playthrough. If anything, even if you were super slow, less than like 20 hours, but like I think generally like 10, 15 hours sounds right. And to me, that should be a main selling point. I say normalize visual novels that get in, get out, don't overstay their welcome. But yeah, Paranormasight has a subtitle. I think it's the seven Mysteries of Hanjo. It is a visual novel that goes into the creepy side of curses and legends and lore bits of Japanese horror-y type things. It does. It's hard to talk too much because this is definitely, with how short it is, it's very hard not to go too in depth without spoiling a bunch of things. But generally, multiple perspectives, intertwining storylines between a bunch of different characters. So you're going to be playing the roles of a handful of characters, but also you're going to see the stories intermingle and stuff. It does that kind of thing as a visual novel. So you'll see the perspective of something happening from one character, then you can see it later on, much later on, see a different perspective, and you're like, oh, and then you put the things together and you're like, oh, it's really cool and interesting. It has some scary moments. Very, thank God for my well-being, not a ton of jump scary type thing. It's much more vibey. I keep using the word vibe. A much more dread feeling, much more scary ambiance, less reliance on jump scare, which is nice. Like I said, some actually fun puzzles. The puzzles aren't super difficult, but like I said, some that are really fun to do. And once you solve, you're like, oh, that was really clever. Some things where you have to both gated by the game and then also gated by how you solve things. Moments where you'll hit like a checkpoint and you're like, you can't progress further until you see something in the game, or literally like the game will say like, you can't get beyond this point in this storyline until you go see something that happened in the other game, or you can't go beyond this point until you solve a meta puzzle, and then you're like, oh, that makes sense. So I think it handles like I'd say gatekeeping, but benchmarking little checkpoints really well for certain things, because it really helps you. It's one of those visual novels that wants you to solve the mysteries, but will kind of not hand-holdy guide you, but naturally let you progress to seeing certain things before other things go on, so you're not like completely lost in the sauce. But yeah, like I said, my main selling point is not only is it cool, have some interesting moments and some aspects, but it is a visual novel that does all those interesting things in a short amount of time and doesn't overstay its welcome. By the time I finished it, I was like, ooh, I could even play this for like a little bit longer once I had seen everything. But I love that we'll probably get this game. It doesn't necessarily like set up like a sequel necessarily or anything. I mean, other than the, you know, the subtitle-ness of it. It gets in, gets out, it does its thing, it says it, you know, it gives you its thing. And I highly recommend. I know it's only 7 on my list, but if you are a visual novel enjoyer that wants to solve some puzzles but doesn't have puzzles that are obnoxious and does some really interesting things, then yeah, highly recommend. Like I said, my hidden gem game that released in 2023. That's just an award I'm making up right now. Hidden game gem. Number 6 is the only game on this list that I didn't stream on the channel for multiple reasons that might become obvious once I say it, is Theater Rhythm. Hope I'm saying that right. Final Bar Line. I had to make sure I got the second part of that title right. Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line. The another entry in the Theater Rhythm series that has been on DSs and 3DS, I believe, before, prior. Final Fantasy series, Totality series rhythm game, which I'm a big fan of music and rhythm games. What a great celebration of Final Fantasy, but more importantly, Final Fantasy music. It's a music and rhythm game that has just a very, very, very light coat of RPG aspects to it. That does it so well that, like, it's there if you really want to dive into the RPG kind of thing, because you choose certain characters or loadouts and different things. But really, it's mostly a music and rhythm game that just has those little aspects that are there if you really want to get into them, or if you're like, this is not what I want to do or invest any time in, you can really skip it, honestly. The best thing about Final Fantasy Final Bar Line, or Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line, is that as you're progressing through the different games, because the way it's set up is you, like, as you're just playing it, is like you pick, like, from a handful. It goes like Final Fantasies 1 through 15, and then some side games and stuff, and you progress through a game. And so really you're seeing a game's, like a selection of a game's songs before you move on to the other one. There were multiple times where there was a handful of games where I'm like, man, I should really either play this game or replay this game just based on the music. Like, I was going through the Final Fantasy 13 section. I was like, man, I really need to replay Final Fantasy 13 at some point. Other Final Fantasy games, even 14 had an amazing selection of music, and that's probably the closest I'll ever get to playing Final Fantasy 14. But that's the biggest kudos I can give to the game, is where I was like, man, I should really play this game. I have no actual hope to actually play, but yeah, it's honestly, you play it and you're like, wow, this is how this music should be treated. I've played the original Theater Rhythm back in the day, but, like, it's such a simplistic setup for playing. It's kind of hard to explain, especially if you're, like, looking at the visuals now as they're on the screen. You're like, what? But they really pare down and make it simple, like the actual inputs. But again, they pull it off so well. You're collecting a bunch of things when you finish songs. Like I said, there's RPG-ness. You collect all these different characters in this unified art style that some people I don't think like, but I think it's kind of cute and makes sense for this kind of game. And it makes sense to have, like, a unifying art style for all the different games that obviously come from different time periods and everything. And like I said, it's a great celebration of, like, it's super fun to, like, play through really old school, NES, Final Fantasies, but then, like, jump into, like, the much more modern series and go through and enjoy those. And it does a really good way of packaging, like I said, as, like, the word I keep saying is celebration, because of the way it packages itself, is like, we're really honoring, like, not only the games but the music from these games, and just how amazing some of these are, from your simple battle tunes to, like, ending credit songs and stuff like that. So obviously I didn't play this on stream because not only did I just think it would be easier to avoid all the DMCA stuff with Final Fantasy music that is, obviously gonna always happen, but also it was, like, my super, like, I finished a day of work, but I just want to chill and play along to, like, playing music games really chills me out. So, like, just listen to a bunch of really good music and then just do the whole Final Fantasy music thing. Honestly though, maybe a few months removed from this list, I'm like, damn, did I put Theater Rhythm too high? But like, it's just such a nice package as far as a rhythm game. It's fun. It's a good time. If you're into Final Fantasy music, if you're like a hardcore, the thing is, if you're a hardcore like music or rhythm player, game player, you're probably going to be maybe a little let down if you're not totally into the Final Fantasy aspect of it. If you're not like a big fan of Final Fantasy or the Final Fantasy music in general, then you're probably going to be a little let down by what it has to offer. But conversely, if you're just a big Final Fantasy or Final Fantasy music fan, not a big music person, I would recommend this game if you could get it, because like I said, it pulls it off really well. And other than that, not only does it, like I said, it simplifies the actual inputs, but it does a really good job of like accessibility stuff. So even if you were like shit at those types of games, but you still wanted to play it and experience it, it does actually a surprisingly good job of letting you customize how you tackle it, from one button presses to auto modes to slowing things down and doing different things. So really, honestly, probably should have said it earlier, but allows you to customize just how you want to tackle the game. So even if you're not a big music game person, you can still really enjoy it. So hard stand by that Theater Rhythm being number 6. Number 5, finally tackled this game midpoint this year. I think it was midpoint. Cuphead. I finally got to Cuphead. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. Again, another game that didn't overstay its welcome. Got in, got out, even played the DLC, and I was like, damn, I could play a Cuphead 2 after all this. Just strikes the nice, perfect balance of being hard enough, but also not being just soul-crushingly hard for my liking, where it's unfun. Like, it doesn't reach that like unfun barrier or level. You spend just enough time on certain stretches where you're like, oh, and even you dominate like one boss so quick, you're like, damn, it makes you feel really fucking good about yourself. Like, anytime I beat a boss, when you like pop out of your seat and you're like, damn, I finally beat that boss, like those moments are great. Obviously, it's a several years old game at this point, so anything that's been said about Cuphead, I probably won't say any better. But great art direction, great music, great just sense of putting you back in that kind of old school vibe, both in gameplay wise and art style. So yeah, we don't need to go too much over Cuphead, but I'm glad I finally played it. Should have probably played it earlier. But yeah, very, very fun. The shortest amount I'll probably spend talking about a game on this list. Number 5, Cuphead. Hey, super quick note here. Editing Austin here. Just wanted to say, I think in previous years I had made a cutoff point in these lists where in the top 10 I've put a cutting point. I said everything above this are like games that I super massively stand by to be like the top of the tops. I stand by all these games any random day. These games could be could be really like a number 1 any year or something. So I think I meant to put that here originally at this in between, starting at the number 4 spot here. So I think if it wasn't already clear, I was my attitude towards trying to, I don't want to script these things, obviously, clearly, as you can see through this video in years past, but yeah, didn't want to miss saying that. I kind of shoot from the hip as far as recording it and just barfing out thoughts there. So meant to definitely put that there though. So yeah, in between 5 and 4, I think here, meant to say that whole spiel that yeah, these next 4 games are the tops of the top. So enjoy watching still, or whatever, I don't know, or continue hate watching, that's cool too. Do whatever you want. Let's see here. Number 4, interesting pick here, but I also massively stand by it. Maybe could even go up to 3 if I was feeling like it. Valkyria Chronicles. This was technically Valkyria Chronicles Remastered. Strategy game that's all about pew pew guns, wartime strategy stuff, but throw in several handfuls of anime goodness and bullshit, and you get Valkyria Chronicles. I had been recommending this game in the past. Valkyria Chronicles is one of those games and series that, like, on certain corners of the internet, you'll have people being like diehards, like, more people should be playing Valkyria Chronicles, and you're just like, it's a tough sell. But I finally dipped into it, played it towards the beginning of this year. I had to, and it's one of the games where after I finished, every like couple years throughout 2023, I would be like, oh, remember that moment in Valkyria Chronicles, or remember just Valkyria Chronicles in general? Like, I had so much fun with that. It definitely scratched that strategy itch for me this year. I was not expecting to get into its systems as much as I did, but something about its like free movement speed system, but also like how just the general fights, how they kind of balance out and work out is it worked out perfectly and exactly how you'd want it to be, and really lent itself to like very much unlike a Fire Emblem, which I'm a big Fire Emblem guy, where you have your individual units and you would just like, you would very much, obviously still same thing, you'd still strategy wise like think about how you're positioning and everything. It lent itself, I feel like, just slightly more than a lot of Fire Emblems, where you're like really being careful about positions and where you are and all these different things. And like I said, the free movement, at first I was like, oh, this isn't going to be as strategic or as fun to maneuver through like the battlefield, I guess you could say. But once you start playing a couple maps, it works out really well. Really good balance with all the characters, so you end up getting like a bunch of units, but they all are individualized. You're not like getting like completely unnamed, people assigned to you or whatever. It's these the game does my biggest thing about it, other than it just being fun to play and the strategy part of it, is that it strikes just the perfect balance of characters, new characters that come into your squad that you can use, strike just a perfect enough balance of being, having obviously a name and personality traits, both that manifest in just flavor text, but also like actual aspects on the battlefield. So their personality assigns them like certain buffs or debuffs in certain situations. It does just enough of that, of giving these characters actual defined characteristics, but also being a blank enough slate where like you start forming your favorites and you're like, oh, I really like this character, and it doesn't give you too much where you could start like, just like I do with Fire Emblem, where if a character dies, I reset the map because I don't want anyone to actually die, and I play I forget, does Fire Emblem use a hardcore terminology for it? I don't know. Same thing with Valkyria Chronicles. You can have characters die and be permanently removed, but I was like, no, if someone dies, we're resetting the map. I did that, and that's because partly, other than the gameplay aspect where I'm like, I want this to be slightly hard on me, but also like you do, as corny as it sounds, feel for a lot of these characters. Like, I want to see them through to the end. I want to see how they evolve or be. It did a really good job of like I said, on the flavor text side, you unlocked as they're kept alive, and as they level up and stuff. Like, you get more and more backstory and certain things, and more like what they do at the towards the end once you've finished and rolled credits. But also, like I said, manifesting certain abilities and traits on the actual battlefield that they have certain characters they're fans of, so they will have like buffs, or the other players on your team that are they hate, and so you'll have like debuffs. It sounds very rudimentary, like really basic, but actually the way it manifests is actually really fun. Like I said, it was very fun. A lot of maps you can take pretty slow at your own pace. It's very nice to have that methodical, like, I'm doing this, and I'm slowly going to push forward and do this certain task. But then also the game strikes a nice balance of quickly like changing up the what you have to do for like a scenario objective. So giving like each time you go into a new chapter, making it feel as if you're having this new, how do I put it? the game does a good job of each chapter making it so that a certain scenario objective is never going to feel super stale. They'll change up what you have to do and completely change up. So as much of a fan of the slow and methodical, I'm going to slowly pick apart this map and the enemy forces or whatever, then it'll suddenly change it up and be like, you have to get to a certain area within a certain amount of turns, so you have to go a lot faster, and so you have to kind of adapt how, not only how you play, but the units you're taking out and everything like that. And then sometimes describing an aspect that would probably feel like would be annoying, but I look at it the opposite way, is that sometimes scenario objectives change mid-map and forces you to think on your feet. And I think a lot of people would probably think of that as being frustrating, especially if you're setting up for one thing and committing to a certain setup, and then like mid-map, without you knowing it's going to happen, you have to change what your whole plan is. I could see how some people might think that's annoying, but especially if it fucks up your thing and someone dies because you're severely out of position, or you weren't planning on something like a new enemy force being introduced mid-map or something. In my opinion, I don't think that's too frustrating. I love that having to adapt mid-map to an unsuspected thing, or if someone dies or you lose, you get a failed state, I kind of like retrying the map, and then knowing that that's going to come mid-change or once a certain trigger happens. I kind of like knowing that then, because I'm like, okay, now I can set it up even more. So I kind of like that aspect. Especially because maps aren't super long. You're never, when I played back, especially like older Fire Emblems, I can always recall like maps that would take, especially with how slow you would sometimes tackle them, you would be in like a map for like an hour or so, and then one thing goes wrong, and then you have to restart, and you're like, you just turn the game off, because you're like, I will come back to this another day, because I can't mentally, I don't want to redo that whole thing. But Valkyria Chronicles, even the longer maps, I don't think would ever approach that long. They were always, again, it was several months ago, but I feel like if you had to restart, you weren't going over like an hour on a map. It was more like in the 30 to 45 minutes at longest, I feel like. So I don't think they actually were that punishing if they were to do some kind of thing like that. Like I said, it's an interesting blend of wartimey strategy, positional battling, setting yourself up for counterattacks and all that, and then, like I said, anime bullshit / goodness where magic shit is happening, and it's just a very funny balance, but like it pulls it off so well. Like I said, some fun characters, some characters that are weird, but like I guess that having that balance of characters that are with a bunch of weird different personalities and stuff. And you start, like I said, the characters have a blank enough slate where they have some defined personality traits that manifest themselves on the field, but also just as flavor text, and you're like, oh, this is this character. But then like how they do for you out on the field, then you start, I couldn't help myself but coming up with like my own slight other backstories for certain characters, and they really surprisingly a surprising amount of like you get attaching yourself to some of these characters and making sure that they make it through to the next chapter without dying. So big massive kudos to Valkyria Chronicles. Was not expecting as much fun as I had with it, so can't help but place it that high at number 4. So Valkyria Chronicles Remastered, number 4. Number 3, the big one mentioned earlier, way earlier in this video, is Umineko When They Cry.
それではこれにて当法廷は閉廷です。
I don't know how to fucking talk about this game. It ended up being just a massive undertaking. A game that I would not have played on my own if I wasn't doing it on stream, for sure. I've said that multiple times. I don't know how to even talk about it. It's such a big thing. I'm not obviously going to go into spoilers at all. I feel like I could ramble about this forever, but again, trying to stay timely about this. Umineko is a visual novel. I think they call it a sound novel because of its reliance on visuals and sound, music, to really portray the narrative. Again, another term I think they throw for it is kinetic novel. So unlike a Danganronpa or a Phoenix Wright or whatever, there isn't decision making, there isn't gameplay to do. It is literally just reading. It is a long ass visual novel. I think I spent probably 150 to 200 hours over the course of last year doing it. Finished it in less than a year. Go me. Enjoyed my experience. It's number 3 on this list, but it definitely gets the coveted favorite stream series of mine for the past year for multiple reasons, just because it was such a wild adventure. Long ass visual novel. I'm just giving like summary of it. That is apparently, you know, put all the words together, its word count together, is longer than I think the ones I always hold on to is like the 3 Lord of the Rings books and The Hobbit put together. I did all of that on stream, read it all out loud. Kind of crazy when I think about it that I did that, but I did. And had a lot of fun with it. Umineko, it's a story. I don't know how else to talk about it because I don't want to sit here and try to just recap it all. It's a timepiece story about a very rich family that has rich family problems and strife. And then a bunch of crazy shit happens. The end. No, it's super long. You'll start with humble beginnings. And then the witch shit hits the fan. It's really hard to talk about this game if it's not evident. I loved my time with Umineko. I loved reading it. I'm glad people, you know, enjoyed me reading it. My favorite parts of Umineko is a lot of the characters. The writing is really good. And I love what Umineko was and is as a tragic family, a tragic family love story. When people try, here's where I talk. I love some of the characters. Like I said, I love some of the characters. I love some of the writing. If I'm to talk about one negative, and this is probably the most divisive, the comment that I can make about this that people will maybe find and disagree with me, and that's fine. I've said this throughout my series of it too, so it's already out there. I think when someone pitches you Umineko, I think maybe correctly they will pitch it as a big old mystery that you can solve, that's super fun to follow along, and yada yada yada. And I don't think they're necessarily wrong in doing that, especially as a pitch to someone who knows nothing about Umineko. Then that's totally fine. I think, this is my personal opinion, that Umineko as a solvable, follow-alongable mystery very slightly falls short on that aspect. Again, I'm not going to get into spoilers, and I'm not even saying, like I said, if someone's pitching you Umineko to read Umineko, they're not 100% wrong of being like, oh, it's like a mystery or whatever. I don't think it's definitely not a spoiler for me to say. I think it falls slightly short of my aspect of a follow-alongable mystery that you can solve, and more is like a very dope, twisty, turny, tragic story that's, I think, a lot more fun to kind of do with the mystery of what's happening as just a subtle backdrop. That's how I would pitch it. Slightly differently. I am glad that the mystery is there to suck people in and be there as like a selling point for a lot of people. And hey, if you claim that you were there from chapter 1 and you were solving the mystery and they should put you in the Scooby-Doo gang, or Blue's Clues should hit you up on speed dial, and you were solving the mystery along the whole way, and you are 100% doing it, more power to you. Honestly, kudos. I'm not even gonna question you. I'm just saying, I think the way the writing works, and the way it emphasizes certain things, and whatever, I think it fails slightly on that aspect. But that, I don't want that to take away too much from what I love about Umineko. Like I said, I think it's still a super fun time. Getting back to the sound novel part of it, I don't want to not give the flowers to the music of Umineko. The music of Umineko is a thing of fucking beauty, up and down. Does a really good job of punctuating and emphasizing certain key aspects of certain chapters. Like once or twice every chapter, like big things will start happening. A certain stretch will happen, and you're like, damn, this is really good. And you're like, why does this feel so epic? And then you're like, oh, it's the fucking music, because they reserve like 1 or 2 or 3 tracks for like each chapter, it felt like, to be introduced in this grand fashion. And I don't even know how to describe it. Some of my favorite tracks in Umineko are like this super techno trancey Western Victorian era songs that are just like, when you find like the individual tracks are like 10 or so plus minutes long, that are just like these, like I said, that's the best way I can describe it. Techno trancey Western Victorian era like songs that are if I can remember in editing to put, I'll put like a small snippet here. just the smallest of snippets there. But yeah, I really loved my time with Umineko. And it's really hard to talk about because, like I said, I either do one of two things. Either I go into spoilery territory, which I don't want to do, or I ramble about it poorly, which I also don't want to do. So I really liked my time with Umineko. Like I said, it was my favorite series. It was my favorite stream series this past year. Not my favorite game. I guess some people would be like, how the hell are you even ranking it as a game? It's just literally a story with some pictures and music. And to that I say, I don't know, get over yourself. It's a game. it's a game. It's presented in a video game manner, so it's a video game. But I loved Umineko. I did so many different things with it this past year. Like I said, not only did I read the whole damn thing and probably destroy my throat and voice multiple times throughout the year doing it, but also did some really fun I fucking cosplayed for a certain character just for a bit in it. So I loved my time with Umineko. I'm really glad certain people had a fun time going along with me. That definitely made it unfortunate, or not unfortunately, but it definitely maybe unfairly boosted my enjoyment of the series because I wasn't just tackling it alone. Like I said, if I wasn't doing it on stream, I probably wouldn't have the time or mind capacity or the attention span to tackle it on my own. So I'm really glad I did. In saying that, some people may argue, and I would be willing to listen to this argument, that I maybe missed certain aspects because of the stream aspect of it. But I also, like I said, if I didn't stream it, it just wouldn't have been done by me. I just wouldn't have done it. So yeah, crazy to think that I'm currently thinking about having to tackle the story previous to Umineko, but maybe just as long, maybe slightly shorter, but same writer and all that. Now for 2024, like even thinking like it feels like I'm only like a couple months removed, and it's actually the truth. I'm only a couple months removed from Umineko, and I'm having to consider the possibility of Higurashi. So, but yeah, number 3, Umineko, When They Cry. Great visual novel. I'll say it right now. I said it before, say it again. Not my favorite visual novel in existence. So I will highly recommend anyone that was like, I really loved Umineko, and I love visual novels, and I love long visual novels that do interesting things. I personally will highly recommend 428 Shibuya Scramble. Play 428 Shibuya Scramble. All right, play it. Number two. This is definitely number 2 and number 1 easily could flip on any given day. I'll be 100% honest. Number 2 for me is Hi-Fi Rush. The surprised shadow dropped, they say, game that released way earlier this year had so many good aspects to it. Amazing fun combat that plays along to the beat kind of aspect to it. Super charming visuals, super charming characters, super charming writing. The one thing I always go to Hi-Fi Rush about, and stick with Hi-Fi Rush, is it has like that, I think it's, a lot of people say it to the point where it got oversaid, but the whole like Saturday morning cartoon aspect to it, the biggest thing is that like its writing, I thought it was going to go for that, and I thought I was going to be annoyed by it, but anytime those types of jokes were delivered, I never groaned. I never like groaned. The writing was actually so good to the point where some jaded ass person like myself still found it to be funny and charming and just really good. That's the biggest compliment I can give this game, is that despite me as the audience, I am a cold-hearted, hard to impress, basically, person, found that the writing never grated on my nerves. and was actually genuinely funny throughout the whole game. Again, a game that wasn't overly bloated, knew what it wanted to accomplish, got in, got out. I think on this aspect, I think its shadow droppedness definitely worked in this game's favor. Not something that a lot of games could pull off or should attempt to pull off for sure, but it is surprising how this game did package itself and come out, and I'm glad a lot of people do, as I'm seeing like a lot of people talking about Hi-Fi Rush in high regards throughout the whole year. Something especially didn't get buried, I think didn't get unfairly buried for being very early in 2023. So yeah, Hi-Fi Rush has some platforming aspects. I think the platforming of the game was maybe my least favorite things when it did try to do certain platformy things. It felt kind of clunky at certain aspects, in my opinion, but it never was detracted from the experience too much. Much more fun, combat-y things, like I said, that's played to the beat of the game. That's its whole shtick. All the characters have you want to do like certain combos and things to the beat of the game. In speaking with that, the music of the game, whether they were licensed tracks or originals for the game, worked so well in tandem with what the game was going for. Boss fights then were really fun when you had boss music and you're playing to all that. Really just a very, very, very fun time with Hi-Fi Rush. There's not a ton else to say about Hi-Fi Rush. Like I said, I very easily any other random day, and as I was building this list, could have put Hi-Fi Rush in the number one spot, but ultimately, I think somewhat reluctantly, I'm going to put this at number 2. I think it's kind of a cop-out to do like 1A, 1B, but if I was to do like a 1A, 1B type situation, this is definitely 1B for sure. That's how close 1 and 2 is to me. So, Hi-Fi Rush, number 2. And finally, number 1. A pick. This is going to sound like a negative, and I kind of mean it to sound like a negative. Maybe my least enthusiastic number 1 pick. You know how like at the beginning of this video, I recounted the last 4 years, my number 1 picks. This is a number 1 pick that is my least enthusiastic, and that's not to detract from me actually thinking it is and should be number 1. It's just like the one I have the least passion about. And I don't know what that says about me. I don't know what it says about the game. I don't know if it means I'm making a bad choice. But like it was impossible for me not to put it at 1. Despite it not be, despite me knowing it is far from like a perfect game. Number 1. And I'm smirking as I say this because I feel very conflicted putting it here. But number 1 is Marvel Spider-Man 2. Here I am picking one of those big old AAA games that are possibly part of the problem of what I was describing at the beginning of the video. At least a slight part of it. And it's kind of... I don't even have, it sounds so anticlimactic. Like, you normally want to be able to ramble about your number 1 pick. You want to talk about all the things that makes it really great. You want to feel like, you want it to come across the screen that like, damn, this is why I'm picking number 1 for this year. But it's almost so good that it's like boring to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, Marvel Spider-Man 2, of course, back when Marvel Spider-Man 1 came out, I was a big fan of that. And this game just took all the bad aspects of Marvel Spider-Man 1, the first one, took all those bad aspects and refined them for an even better experience in 2. Which you could see as they kind of did with Miles Morales. They kind of, you know, sharpened some of the best moments and took out, again, some of the least liked moments. They made side quests have work in like a chain fashion, kind of like how Final Fantasy 16 made it felt like they kind of wanted to pull off, where side quests, you would follow side quests through and see the multiple steps. But instead of having to pick 10 flowers and kill 2 pigs to then see an emotional thing like, you know, 50 hours later, this was like, oh, you want to do the side quest? Here's all these cool mini steps throughout, and then here's like a big dope reveal with certain characters or things happening that even maybe set up for things that might happen in later like a Marvel Spider-Man 3. It did a really good job of making side quests something you were actually super excited to do. Many people talk about it, but Marvel Spider-Man, both the original and this now number 2, does a really good job of getting people who normally don't even care to spend an 100% games. Like, it makes it so easy and worthwhile to do. Sound design top notch. I hate to be so lame sounding, but like, damn, does it, again, so boring to talk about, but the technical things that's like the game actually ends up accomplishing shouldn't be ignored. Again, not the most thrilling or fun thing to talk about, but like underneath the hood, some of the technical things, whether it's, you know, like I said, sound design, or even as something as boring as like loading times and stuff like that, like the seamlessness of certain things, I feel shouldn't be ignored, even though it's not the most flashy thing to talk about. Playing as both Peter and Miles was fun. I love their different kits that they could do and all that. Some, again, not a perfect game. Definitely don't want me putting it as number 1, me being like, this is a perfect game. I just had so much fun with it, and it was exactly the I don't interact much with like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I always talk about how like I've never seen an MCU movie and stuff like that. Like, I just don't care. It's not my thing, whatever. But in general, I've always been like Spider-Man fan and a Batman fan, and that's why I liked the Arkham games in the back, you know, back in the day. And it's why I like the Spider-Man games, because it is like the perfect versions of a superhero game for the superheroes. New things that were introduced in this one as well, like the flying, which again, such a small aspect, but like I remember leading up to release, when I knew that the flying suit thing was a thing, I was like, oh, this isn't going to be as fun, and they're trying to just add things for the sake of adding things. But it ended up becoming so fluid, where you're like, oh, this working in tandem with the super fun, still there. Web slinging around the city is still there and just works so well in tandem. Some really nice late game reveals, and also some, you know, fan servicey nods to certain characters or aspects and stuff like that. Just really fun. The main story did at certain points get a little, for lack of a term, too much. Does that make sense? Just a little much for certain things, especially when it comes to like Peter and stuff. But overall, I like where the game ends with the characters, especially like Peter and Miles and stuff like that. I love where it kind of sets it up, like I said, for potential either another mini game, kind of like Miles Morales, or a proper third title. Very interested in those in the next several years. Yeah, like I said, if I sound unenthused or non-passionate about picking this as my number 1, it's just because it's hard to want to have such an interesting, it's a balance act, right? It's like, I feel like it should be number 1, and it definitely could be number 2. I could switch it and Hi-Fi Rush on any, like I said, any given day in my head. You know, just not the most flashy picks. I think when people make these lists, they want like, and like, even if you were, I don't think I did this in the past, but you could even accuse me of like last 2 years, like picking Inscription and then picking Neon White, like picking slightly more flashier picks. But I don't agree with that. Obviously, I pick what I think were the number 1s, but I can't help but as I was looking at this list, being like, you know what, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is definitely number 1 for me. So, unfortunate if that's unexciting to you as a viewing experience. You come to this end of this list, you're like, damn, Umineko only got 3. He has the fucking audacity to put Disco Elysium at 8, and then Marvel Spider-Man 2 at 1 this year. But yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Once I publish this and then months later, maybe I'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have put Marvel Spider-Man 2 at 1. But I had a lot of fun with it. So it is locked in as of this recording. Fun time. Fun time. Maybe not the funnest to like watch someone play too. I should point that out. You know, just this blockbustery type game, but no, I really enjoyed it. It's exactly, like I said, the best way I can put it is the perfect boiled down, I want to play a video game based on the superhero that, you know, maybe my favorite hero, at least number 2, possibly. It's like the perfect, I'm doing a thing with my hands. It's the perfect experience of what that hero could be in a video game. So kudos to Insomniac, killing it, honestly, with these titles. And the biggest question I think going forward is, I know next is going to be like a Wolverine game, and I have no like actual real attachment to Wolverine. So can they pull off the same magic for someone like me, who's like, I don't really care about Wolverine? Can they do it and then make me interested in the game? So that'll be a few years from now, though, won't it? We'll see. So that does it. I think I did a bit shorter than last year's video, so that's a win in the column. Tried to be as non-spoilery and concise as possible, while also giving a bit of info on the things, but also as I get older and try to spend less and less trying to script these things, try to literally, like I said, not just, I don't want to just go number 10 this, number 9 this, number 8 this, but also don't want to bog down the videos. I want them to kind of get in and get out, just like some of the games that made this list. Get in and get out. 2024, I think we're slowly going this way, but I want games to get in and get out. Tell me what you're doing with the game. Do the things quickly. Move on. As you get older, you appreciate stuff like that more and more. And look at me, I'm fucking old as shit. That does it for the list. Only 10 games of 2023. Like I said, if I gave an honorable mention section, I could go on and on about other games that definitely deserve to be mentioned. But like I said, I would highly recommend, just if you're interested in some of the other games that weren't on this list, or if you're interested in some of the games I played that aren't on this list, they're all up on YouTube pretty much. Or like I said, the GG app that's linked at various moments you can find, places you can find, I mean. Or if there's games on the list that you want me to see me play through, those are all up in there on YouTube as well. I'm kind of just spending an hour and a half recording, and the brain just becomes a pile of mush, doesn't it? Even more than normal. I'm just saying words. I don't even know if I'm making sense. 2024, we'll do it again. Let's do this all again. At least one more year. Yeah, a year from now, you'll get hopefully, a Games Beaten in 2024 video. Top 10. Just like my streams, I don't know how to end these videos. You would think after so many years I'd find a better way to end videos.